My name is Emily Carter. I was 29 when this happened, the age where you think you've shaken off the shadows of childhood, only to realize some shadows follow you no matter how far you go. The trip to Hawaii was supposed to be special. I had planned it for months, booked the tickets myself, even pitched in extra money so my parents wouldn't have to worry. My sister, Claire, was coming too, of course. She was 32, married to a banker, already with a house in the suburbs and a golden reputation that followed her like perfume. Me? I was the younger daughter, the artsy one, the one who had bounced between jobs, the one who hadn't yet produced a husband or a child for my parents to brag about. I had a steady job finally as a graphic designer at a mid-sized firm, but in their eyes it was always just a job. When we boarded the plane, I tried to let the excitement swallow my unease. The flight attendants greeted us with smiles. The seats smelled faintly of coffee and fabric softener, and the soft roar of the engines reminded me I was leaving behind deadlines and gray skies. I wanted so badly for this to be the trip where things changed, where my mother would finally look at me and not just see Claire's younger, lesser shadow. But even on the plane, little cracks appeared. Claire sat in the aisle, flipping through a glossy travel magazine, her engagement ring catching the cabin lights. My mom leaned over every few minutes to ask her questions. Do you think you'll like the luau? Should we book a spa day for you? Did you see this excursion option? Every question was for Claire. When I tried to chime in, my mother gave me that absent smile. The one that says, I hear you, but you don't matter. Still, I told myself not to ruin it. When we landed in Honolulu, the air hit me like a warm blanket, humid, salty, alive. The palm trees swayed like dancers, and the ocean shimmered so blue it didn't seem real. I wanted to drink it in, savor every detail. And for the first 2 days, I almost believed I could. We went to Waikiki, tried shaved ice that stained our tongues, and drove along the coast with the windows down and the radio blasting. But even then, the favoritism simmered beneath everything. At the beach, my mom fussed over Claire's sunscreen, reminding her every hour to reapply. When I joked, hey, do I not get protection too? My mother chuckled and said, Claire's skin burns easier than yours. You'll be fine. At dinner the second night, when the waiter asked who had reserved the table, Claire spoke up before I could. My mom beamed at her and said, of course she did. Claire always takes care of things. I wanted to slam my fork down and scream. No, I did. I booked this entire trip. But the words caught in my throat like a fishbone. That's the thing about being the overlooked child. You learn silence. On the third night, it all came undone. We had gone to a seaside restaurant, the kind with flickering tiki torches and tables perched just above the sand. The smell of grilled pineapple and roasted pork filled the air, and the sound of waves made everything feel cinematic. I thought maybe, just maybe, this would be the evening where my mom finally saw me. The food arrived, steaming and fragrant, and for a while, the conversation was light. My dad was telling a story about his fishing trip years ago. Claire was scrolling through her phone showing pictures of her kids. I laughed along, sipping my Mai Tai, trying to hold on to the moment. And then my mother leaned forward. She looked at me, her lips curling the way they do when she's about to deliver a cutting remark, and she said, loud enough for the table beside us to hear, you'll never be as good as your sister. The words hit me like a slap, the torches flickering around us, the chatter of other tables fading into static. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My fork clattered against my plate, the sound sharp in the warm Hawaiian night. Claire's eyes darted to mine, then away, as if she didn't want to be part of it. My dad shifted uncomfortably, cleared his throat, but said nothing. And my mother just sat back, satisfied, as if she had delivered some great truth the world needed to hear. Heat rose in my chest, my palms sweaty, my heart pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. I had spent 29 years swallowing words. I had smiled through comparisons, endured the constant, why can't you be more like Claire, carried the invisible weight of being the disappointment. But that night, with the ocean roaring behind me and the taste of salt and rum on my tongue, something inside me broke, and something else took its place. I pushed back my chair, stood tall, and said, I am not Claire. And I don't want to be. The words came out sharper than I expected, my voice carrying across the tables. The couple sitting near us turned their heads, their conversation halting mid-sentence. My mother blinked, startled, but her lips quickly curled again into that familiar sneer. "What's gotten into you, Emily?" she asked, tilting her head, voice laced with mock concern. "It's just the truth. You've always been so sensitive." Sensitive. That word she'd used 100 times, as if my emotions were flaws to be ironed out. "I'm not sensitive," I said, my voice trembling but steady enough to hold. "I'm tired. Tired of being compared to Claire. Tired of you pretending she's perfect and I'm nothing. I planned this trip. I paid for half of it. And you can't even see me sitting right in front of you." My dad shifted, his fork paused midair, eyes darting between us. Claire's cheeks flushed pink as she looked down at her plate, clearly wishing she were anywhere else. But my mother? She laughed. "Oh, Emily," she said, patting the air like she was brushing away a fly. "Always so dramatic. You should be grateful you even got to come. Claire's been working so hard, raising her kids, supporting her husband, building a life. And you? You draw pictures on a computer. It's not the same." It wasn't the words that stung the most, it was the way she said them. Dismissive. Belittling. Like my life, my work, my choices were all laughable. For years, I'd swallowed it down. For years, I'd told myself maybe she was right, maybe I was less. But something about being on that island, surrounded by beauty I had made possible for them, snapped me awake. I leaned forward, my palms flat on the table, and I said, "You don't get to decide what's valuable. You don't get to tell me my life means less because it doesn't look like Claire's. I'm not going to sit here and let you tear me apart anymore." The table went silent. The sound of the waves and distant laughter filled the pause. My chest heaved, adrenaline pumping through my veins. My mom's face hardened. "You're embarrassing yourself," she said coldly. "No," I whispered, my throat tight. "I'm finally standing up for myself." I grabbed my napkin, dropped it on the table, and walked away. I didn't make it far before the tears came. I stood on the beach just beyond the restaurant, the sand cool beneath my heels, the ocean stretching endless and dark. My heart felt like it was tearing apart. For so long, I had hoped for her approval, for one word, one gesture that said I mattered as much as Claire. But standing there, staring at the waves crashing against the shore, I realized it might never come. And maybe, just maybe, I had to stop needing it. Still, the hurt was unbearable. I thought back to childhood. All the times I had tried to earn her love. The spelling bee in 5th grade where I placed second, and instead of congratulating me, she had said, "Claire would have won." The high school art show where I'd won first prize and she'd said, "That's nice, but what are you going to do with that?" Even my first job out of college, when I called her excited about the offer, her first question had been, "Does it come with benefits like Claire's?" Every memory stacked on top of the other, forming a mountain of small cuts that had bled me dry. On that Hawaiian beach, I let myself cry. Really cry. For the girl who had never been enough. For the woman still clawing for worth. And then, I wiped my face and went back inside. When I returned to the table, Claire was the first to look up. Her eyes were soft, guilty almost. "Emily," she started, but her voice faltered. I shook my head. "Don't. You don't have to defend me. Not anymore." My mother pursed her lips, clearly waiting for me to apologize, to fall back into the role of the quiet, overlooked daughter. But I didn't. I sat down, picked up my drink, and sipped slowly, letting the silence speak louder than any apology ever could. The rest of the meal passed in tense quiet. My dad tried to make small talk about the weather, about the snorkeling trip planned for the next day, but the words died quickly. Claire stayed quiet, her fork pushing food around her plate. My mother kept her eyes on her Mai Tai, her face set in stone. When we left the restaurant, the night air was heavy with salt and flowers. I walked a few paces behind the others, my mind racing. Something had shifted. I couldn't go back to the way things were. The next morning I woke early. The hotel balcony overlooked the ocean, the horizon painted pink and gold. I wrapped myself in a robe, sipped the bitter hotel coffee, and let the breeze tangle my hair. I thought about what I'd said, about how raw it had felt to finally speak aloud the words I had swallowed for years. It was terrifying, yes, but also liberating. My phone buzzed. A text from Claire.
Can we talk?
I stared at it for a long time before replying, meet me downstairs. When I saw her in the lobby, she looked small. Not the confident, put-together sister I was used to, but softer, almost vulnerable. Emily, she said quietly. I didn't know it was that bad. I laughed bitterly. How could you not know? You've always been the favorite. The golden child. You've heard the comparisons as much as I have. Her shoulders sagged. I thought it was just mom being mom. I didn't realize how much it hurt you. Her words twisted in my chest. Part of me wanted to lash out, to tell her she should have known, should have stood up for me. But another part of me saw the sincerity in her eyes, the guilt weighing on her. I don't want to fight with you, Claire, I said finally. I just want to stop feeling like I don't exist. She reached out, hesitated, then touched my hand. You do exist, Emily. More than you know. The tears threatened again, but this time they weren't just from pain. For the first time, I felt like maybe, just maybe, Claire saw me. And that was the beginning of something I never expected. The possibility that my biggest ally might come from the very sister I'd been compared to my entire life. Claire and I sat together in the hotel lobby for a while after that, sipping watery coffee from paper cups while the hum of tourists passed around us. For once, there wasn't the usual edge between us. Instead, there was something human, fragile. She listened while I told her what it felt like growing up in her shadow, how every accomplishment of mine seemed to vanish the moment Mom brought up hers. I used to think if I just tried harder, I'd finally be seen, I admitted, staring at the patterned carpet. But no matter what I did, it was never enough. Not next to you. Claire's eyes softened, guilt flickering across her face. I don't know what to say. I didn't ask for her to compare us. I hate that she did that to you. For the first time in years, I believed her. We talked until the sun crept higher, casting light through the lobby windows, making the palm trees outside glow like stained glass. It felt strange. Like the sister I'd been jealous of all my life was suddenly someone I could share my pain with. But if I thought that conversation would magically fix things, I was wrong. Later that morning, we joined our parents for breakfast. The dining area smelled of bacon and sweet rolls, laughter carrying from other tables. I felt lighter after talking to Claire, almost hopeful. That hope lasted about 10 minutes. My mom barely looked at me. When the waitress came to take orders, she smiled at Claire and said, "Get whatever you want, honey. You deserve to enjoy yourself. You've worked so hard." Then she glanced at me. "And you maybe just get something simple. You know you don't always finish what you start." The words were casual, almost offhand, but they sliced through me all the same. Claire's head snapped up, her fork clattering against her plate. "Mom," she said sharply, "don't talk to her like that." The table went silent. My dad's eyes widened, darting between us. My mother froze, her face tightening in disbelief. "What did you just say?" she asked, her voice icy. "I said don't talk to Emily like that," Claire repeated, her jaw set.
She's not a child.
"And she doesn't deserve your constant digs." Heat rose in my cheeks. I dreamed of hearing anyone, say those words on my behalf for years. And here was Claire, the golden child herself, finally standing up for me. But my mother's reaction was swift and venomous. "You don't understand, Claire," she snapped. "I've only ever wanted Emily to do better. To push herself. If she can't handle a little criticism, maybe she's not cut out for much after all." "Stop." Claire's voice cracked with anger. "This isn't criticism. It's cruelty. And you've been doing it for years." My dad tried to interject, his voice trembling. "Maybe we should just—" "No," Claire interrupted, glaring at our mother. "We're not sweeping this under the rug anymore." I sat frozen, my heart hammering, torn between gratitude and terror. Gratitude that Claire was finally defending me. Terror because I knew my mother. She didn't forgive challenges to her authority easily. And sure enough, her face twisted, her lips pressed into a hard line. You think you know everything, Claire, but you don't. You don't know what it's like trying to raise a daughter who won't live up to her potential. Always disappointing, always lagging behind. You've always been my pride. Emily, she turned to me, her eyes cold. You've always been my burden. The words landed like stones. I felt the air leave my lungs. Around us, silverware clinked, conversations carried on, the world blissfully ignorant of the earthquake happening at our table. For 29 years, I had feared hearing those words spoken out loud. And now that they had been, I felt something inside me harden. I wasn't going to cry, not this time. I stood slowly, my chair scraping against the tile. My voice shook, but it carried. If I've always been a burden to you, then maybe you don't deserve me in your life. Gasps echoed from a nearby table. Claire's eyes widened, her hand covering her mouth. My dad's fork fell with a clatter. But my mother? She just stared, unflinching. I turned and walked away, my chest tight, my legs trembling. I spent the rest of that day alone, wandering the beaches. The ocean stretched endless before me, waves crashing against the shore like they were trying to shake the world awake. I let the salt air fill my lungs, the sand burn against my bare feet, trying to ground myself. I thought about the word burden, how it had clung to me invisibly all these years, shaping how I saw myself. And then I thought about Claire's face at the table. The shock, the anger, the way she had defended me without hesitation. Maybe my mother would never change. But maybe, just maybe, I could stop measuring my worth through her eyes. As the sun dipped low, painting the water in orange and pink, I whispered to myself, I am not her burden. I never was. And for the first time, I almost believed it. That evening, Claire knocked on my hotel room door. When I opened it, her eyes were red, her expression heavy. I can't believe she said that to you, she murmured. I'm so sorry. I swallowed hard, my throat tight. I think I always knew she felt that way. I just didn't want to hear it. Claire stepped inside, closing the door behind her. You don't deserve it. You're not a burden, Emily. You're amazing. You've built a life on your own. You've never asked anyone to save you. You're stronger than she'll ever admit. Her words cracked something in me, but in a good way this time. Tears spilled, but they were different, cleansing, not crushing. For the first time, it felt like my sister and I were on the same side. And as we sat together on that hotel bed, the muffled sound of waves outside, I realized that maybe my story wasn't just about my mother's cruelty. Maybe it was also about the unexpected bond one could finally build with Claire. But I also knew one thing with certainty. The trip wasn't over and my mother wasn't done. The next day, we had a snorkeling trip scheduled. I almost skipped it. I could still feel the sting of my mother's words, the way she had branded me a burden in front of everyone. But something inside me whispered that if I hid, if I let her win by shrinking into myself, I'd regret it. So I laced up my sandals, packed my bag, and told myself I would go. The harbor was alive with color and sound. Bright boats bobbed against the dock, their hulls painted in cheerful reds and blues. The smell of salt water mixed with sunscreen, and tourists laughed as they adjusted their flippers and masks. Claire chattered with the tour guide, her natural ease drawing people to her like bees to honey. My dad adjusted his sun hat, already sweating. My mother, of course, stood apart. Perfectly dressed for the occasion in a wide-brimmed hat and a white linen cover-up, she looked like she was posing for a travel magazine. Her eyes slid past me like I wasn't even there. That should have hurt. But instead, it lit a fire inside me. On the boat, the guide gave safety instructions. I tried to listen, but my mother's voice cut through the hum of the engine. She leaned toward Claire, loudly enough for me to hear. You've always been so graceful in the water. Emily, on the other hand, well, she was never athletic. It was said with that sugar-coated tone, the kind that pretends to be harmless. But it wasn't harmless. It was another knife slipped between my ribs. Claire turned sharply. Mom, enough. Enough of what? My mother asked innocently, adjusting her sunglasses. I'm just being honest. You're being cruel, Claire shot back. I sat frozen, my hands gripping the bench. For years, I had dreamed of someone calling her out like that. But hearing it now, on a boat full of strangers, I felt exposed. The guide clapped his hands, breaking the tension. All right, everyone, into the water. I put on my mask, pulled the strap tight, and slipped into the sea. The water was warm, almost silky, and as I floated, schools of rainbow fish darted beneath me. For a few precious minutes, I forgot everything. Down here, there were no comparisons, no sneers, just the endless rhythm of the ocean. But when I surfaced, gasping with joy, I heard it again. Look at Claire, my mother said proudly from the boat. She's such a natural. Emily, well, she tries. Laughter rippled from a couple near her. My chest burned. I wanted to dive back under and never come up. Instead, I swam to the ladder, hauled myself back onto the boat, and stood dripping in front of her. Stop it, I said, water streaming down my arms. Just stop. She raised her eyebrows. Stop what? Stop belittling me. Stop turning everything into a contest I can never win. Stop acting like I don't exist except as a shadow to Claire. I'm done playing that role. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. For once, she looked genuinely stunned. Claire placed a hand on my arm, her eyes shining with pride. My dad sat stiffly, his gaze fixed on the horizon, as if pretending none of this was happening. The silence was heavy, broken only by the slap of waves against the hull. Finally, my mother spoke, her voice low and cutting. You should be grateful for everything we've done for you. Do you think we raised you just so you could talk to me this way? Disrespect me in public. I felt the words rising before I could stop them. Respect goes both ways. And you've never given me any. Her face darkened, but I didn't flinch.
Not this time.
Back at the hotel, the tension followed us like a storm cloud. Claire kept close to me, whispering encouragement when my mother passed by with icy silence. My dad busied himself with the TV, avoiding eye contact. That night, we had tickets for a luau. I considered skipping again, but once more, I forced myself to go. I wasn't going to let her ruin Hawaii for me. The luau was magical. Fire dancers spun blazing torches against the night sky, their movements sharp and mesmerizing. Drummers pounded rhythms that vibrated through the ground, and the air smelled of roasted pork and tropical flowers. I let myself laugh, clapping along, sipping from a coconut drink. For a while, I even felt normal.
Whole.
But then my mother struck again. As the performers finished and the crowd applauded, she leaned across the table, her voice sharp enough to slice through the music. You can put on a brave face, Emily, but you'll never shine the way Claire does. You should accept that. The words punched the air from my lungs. I stared at her, stunned, while the applause around us roared. Claire slammed her hands on the table. That's it, Mom. Enough. The crowd turned, startled. My mother looked horrified, not by what she'd said, but by the attention. Claire's voice shook with fury. You've spent Emily's entire life tearing her down, and I'm sick of it. You don't get to talk to her that way anymore. Gasps echoed from nearby tables. My dad rubbed his temples, muttering, Can we not do this here? But it was too late. The floodgates had opened. I stood slowly, my legs trembling, but my voice clear.
She's right.
You don't get to talk to me like that ever again. I'm not your disappointment, your burden, or your scapegoat. I'm your daughter. And if you can't treat me with respect, then maybe you don't deserve to have me in your life at all. For the first time, the words felt final, not a plea for recognition, but a declaration of independence. My mother's face went pale. She opened her mouth, then closed it, her hands shaking against the tablecloth. The crowd returned to their own conversations, but the damage was done. The line had been drawn. That night, back in my room, I lay awake staring at the ceiling fans spinning lazily above me. The sound of waves drifted in through the balcony doors. For years, I had dreamed of standing up to her. I'd pictured it 100 different ways, me finally saying the perfect line, her finally realizing her cruelty. But the reality was different.
She hadn't changed.
She might never change. And for the first time, I realized maybe I didn't need her to. Maybe what mattered wasn't her apology, it was my freedom. As the waves whispered outside, I promised myself, no matter what happened next, I would not go back to being silent. Not in Hawaii. Not at home. Not ever again. The morning after the luau, the air in our hotel suite was heavy, suffocating. My mother barely looked at me, her movements clipped and precise, as she packed her beach bag. My dad mumbled something about coffee and disappeared. Claire gave me a look that said don't back down, but she, too, seemed drained. I thought maybe things would calm down, that my mother would retreat into silence rather than confrontation. I was wrong. We had planned a drive along the Hannah Highway that day, the famous winding road lined with waterfalls and lush greenery. The scenery was breathtaking, ferns spilling over cliffs, the ocean crashing against black volcanic rock, rainbows arching across the mist. But inside the car, the atmosphere was anything but beautiful. I sat in the back seat, Claire beside me. My parents sat in front, Dad driving, Mom in the passenger seat with her sunglasses perched like armor. For a while, no one spoke. The only sound was the winding road beneath the tires and the distant call of tropical birds. I almost believed we'd make it through the day in peace. Then my mother turned to her seat, her eyes locking on me in the rearview mirror. "You humiliated me last night," she said coldly. "In front of strangers. In front of your sister. Do you have any idea how embarrassing that was for me?" My stomach clenched. Claire shifted beside me, her jaw tightening. "Embarrassing for you?" I asked softly. "What about me? What about a lifetime of being belittled?" She scoffed. "Oh, please. You've had every opportunity. You just squandered them. And now you lash out because you can't stand that Claire turned out better." Claire's hands clenched into fists. "Mom, stop." But my mother wasn't listening. Her voice rose, sharp as glass. "You've always been jealous, Emily. Always resentful. And you know what? I'm tired of pretending you're anything but a disappointment. Claire is everything I wanted in a daughter. You're just the extra." The word extra echoed in the car, bouncing off the windows, slamming into me like a physical blow. I couldn't breathe. My chest felt hollow, like she had ripped something vital from me. Claire's voice broke through, furious. "How dare you? She's not extra. She's your daughter. Do you hear yourself?" My dad gripped the wheel tighter, his knuckles white. "Let's not." "No," I exploded, my voice shaking. "Don't try to smooth this over, Dad. Don't you dare." The car went silent. Even the birds outside seemed to hush. I leaned forward, my eyes locked on the back of my mother's head. "All my life, I've wanted one thing from you, your love. Not comparisons. Not contempt. Just love. But you can't give it. Maybe you never could. And I'm done killing myself trying to earn it." My voice cracked, but I didn't stop. "If Claire is everything you want, then fine. You can have her. But you don't get to keep tearing me apart just because I'll never fit into the mold you built. I'm not your disappointment. I'm not your burden. And I'm not your extra." The car slowed to a stop at a scenic overlook. My dad pulled over, his shoulders sagging with exhaustion. The ocean stretched endlessly before us, wild and untamed, like the storm raging inside me. For once, my mother didn't respond. She just sat stiffly, her sunglasses hiding her eyes, her lips pressed thin. I opened the door and stepped out, the warm Hawaiian air wrapping around me like a balm. Claire followed, her hand brushing mine in silent solidarity. We stood at the edge of the overlook, staring at the waves crashing far below. I breathed deeply, letting the salt air cleanse me, letting the sound of the surf drown out the echoes of her words. Claire finally spoke, her voice soft but firm. "You know she's wrong, right?" My throat tightened. "Then why does it still feel like she's right?" "Because she's been drilling it into you your whole life," Claire said, her eyes fierce. "But that doesn't make it true. You're not extra, Emily. You never were. You're you. And that's enough." The tears came then, hot and fast, spilling down my cheeks. Claire pulled me into her arms, holding me tight against her shoulder. For the first time in years, I let myself lean into her, let myself believe she meant it. That night, back at the hotel, I lay awake again. My mother hadn't spoken to me since the blow-up in the car. She moved around the suite like I was invisible, her silence heavier than her insults. But something inside me had shifted. For the first time, I wasn't crumbling under her words. I wasn't begging her to see me. I was starting to see myself. I thought about the word she'd used, extra. For a moment it haunted me. But then I realized, extra wasn't always a bad thing. Extra meant more. Extra meant overflowing. Extra meant beyond. And maybe that's what I was. Beyond her narrow definition of worth. Beyond her ability to love. Beyond her cruel comparisons. As I drifted into uneasy sleep, one thought anchored me. If this trip had been about proving myself to her, I was done. From now on, I would live for me. The next morning, I woke with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The Hawaiian sun filtered through the sheer curtains, painting the room in gold. Outside, I could hear the ocean crashing rhythmically against the shore. It should have been peaceful. It should have been paradise. But I knew the storm inside our family wasn't over. I got dressed in a sundress I'd bought for the trip, soft coral fabric that made my skin look warmer, my hair brighter. For once, I didn't put it on for anyone's approval. I wore it for myself. When I stepped into the suite's main room, Claire was sipping coffee on the balcony, her eyes shadowed with exhaustion but soft when they met mine. My dad sat at the table, staring at the newspaper he hadn't turned a page on in 10 minutes. And my mother? She sat rigid on the sofa, arms crossed, sunglasses perched on her face, even indoors. The silence was unbearable. Finally, I spoke. I think we need to talk. My mom scoffed, not even removing her glasses. There's nothing to talk about. You've made your feelings perfectly clear. You don't respect me. Claire slammed her cup down, liquid sloshing over the rim. Respect? Mom, you've been tearing Emily down since we got here. Since before we got here. How do you expect her to respect you when you don't give her any in return? My mother's lips tightened. I raised you both. I put food on the table, a roof over your heads. I sacrificed. And this is how you repay me? By turning against me? Her voice cracked slightly at the end, the first sliver of vulnerability I'd ever heard from her. But I wasn't swayed. Yes, you raised us, I said evenly. But raising a child isn't the same as loving them. You gave Claire pride. You gave her praise. And you gave me contempt. Do you know what that does to a person? To always feel like the family mistake. For the first time, my mother flinched. I continued, my voice steadier now, stronger. I am not your burden. I am not your extra. I am your daughter. And I deserved love too. If you couldn't give that, then at least admit it instead of dressing it up as tough love. The room was quiet but pulsing with energy. My dad rubbed his forehead, whispering, "Please, let's not do this here." But I didn't back down. "I need you to hear this." I pressed on, my eyes locked on my mother's. "I'm not chasing your approval anymore. I don't need your validation to live my life. From this moment on, I'm free from your comparisons. Free from your judgment. I will never let your words define me again." Something shifted in me as I said it, like a chain snapping free. My mother's face went pale. She opened her mouth, then closed it. She looked smaller somehow, the sharpness draining from her posture. Claire reached over and squeezed my hand. Her touch was grounding, steady. "You know what, Emily?" she said softly, her eyes shining. "You don't just deserve love. You deserve respect. And I'm proud of you." The tears I'd been holding back spilled freely. But this time, they weren't tears of defeat. They were tears of release. My mother stood suddenly, her sunglasses slipping down her nose. For a heartbeat, I thought she might finally say the words I'd waited my whole life to hear. But instead, she walked to the door. "If that's how you feel," she said stiffly, "then maybe we need some space." And just like that, she left the suite, the door clicking shut behind her. The rest of the day was strangely quiet. My dad buried himself in his newspaper, avoiding the subject entirely. Claire and I walked along the beach, letting the warm waves lap at our ankles. She told me stories of her own struggles, things I'd never known. How she sometimes hated the pedestal Mom had put her on. How heavy the pressure had been. How she'd envied my freedom, even as I envied her approval. It felt like a confession, a bridge built where there had only been distance before. "Maybe we can rewrite this," Claire said, her eyes hopeful. "Maybe we don't have to keep playing the roles Mom gave us." I nodded, my chest lighter.
Yeah.
Maybe we can. That evening, we attended one final dinner as a family, though my mother barely spoke. She kept her eyes on her plate, her fork moving mechanically.
But I didn't let it crush me this time.
I laughed with Claire, listened to my dad's awkward stories, and focused on the beauty of the island outside the restaurant's open windows. When the check came, my mother finally looked at me. Her eyes were unreadable, but her voice was softer than I'd heard it in years. "You've made your point," she said quietly. "I hope you're happy now." It wasn't an apology. Not really. But it was something. A crack in her armor. And maybe, just maybe, it was the closest she could come. I met her gaze and nodded. "I am." And for the first time, I meant it. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about everything that had happened. The sneers, the comparisons, the word burden cutting like a knife. But also the courage I'd found, the bond with Claire I'd never expected, the strength to finally stand tall. Hawaii hadn't been the paradise I imagined, but maybe it had given me something better. A chance to shed the chains of my past. A chance to redefine who I was, not through my mother's eyes, but through my own. As the waves crashed outside, steady and endless, I whispered to myself, "I am enough." I always was. And for the first time in my life, I truly believed it. The last morning in Hawaii felt different. The island was still itself, waves roaring, palms swaying, air heavy with plumeria, but inside me, something had shifted. I no longer felt the crushing weight of trying to measure up, of waiting for scraps of validation that would never come. I dressed simply. Denim shorts, a white cotton tank, sandals. No effort to look perfect. No desperate wish for someone else's approval. Just me. As I zipped my suitcase, I caught sight of myself in the mirror. My chestnut brown hair fell loose around my shoulders, my hazel eyes tired but steady. For the first time, I liked what I saw, not because I looked flawless, but because I looked real. Downstairs in the lobby, the family gathered for checkout. My dad handled the bill with the clerk, looking relieved the week was ending. Claire stood beside me, her hand brushing mine in quiet solidarity. And my mother, she sat apart on one of the wicker chairs, her sunglasses perched once again, her face unreadable. The silence stretched. Finally, I broke it. "I don't know what happens when we go home," I said, my voice steady. "But I do know one thing. I'm not going back to being silent. I've let myself be small for too long." My dad looked at me with weary eyes. Claire smiled faintly. My mother's lips tightened, but she didn't respond. And that was okay. The flight home was long, the hum of the engines a backdrop to my thoughts. Claire dozed beside me, her head tilted against the seat. My dad read a magazine, flipping pages without focus. My mom stared out the window, her posture stiff. I watched the clouds drift by and let the week replay in my mind. The sneer at dinner. The word burden in the car. The word extra. The sting of every comparison. Every dismissal. But alongside those memories were new ones. Me standing tall at the luau. Me refusing to let her cruelty define me. Me realizing that Claire could be my ally instead of my rival. The pain was still there, raw and fresh. But beneath it, a stronger truth had taken root. I was not broken. I was not less. I was enough. Back home, the routine of daily life returned quickly. Work emails piled up, laundry needed folding, bills waited on the counter. But inside, I was still carrying Hawaii. Not the beaches or the luau's, but the strength I had unearthed there. My mother returned to her usual rhythm of silence and sharp comments, but they no longer pierced the way they used to. They were background noise now, no longer the script I lived by. One evening, about a week after we got back, Claire came over to my apartment. We sat on the balcony with glasses of wine, the city lights flickering below. "I keep thinking about Hawaii," she said, swirling her glass. "About how brave you were." I laughed softly. Brave? I was terrified the whole time. "Bravery isn't about not being scared," she said. "It's about speaking anyway. And you did. You finally stood up for yourself. I wish I'd done more sooner." Her voice cracked, and I reached over, squeezing her hand. "You did what mattered. You stood with me when I needed it most. That's more than I ever expected." We sat there in comfortable silence, the bond between us no longer fragile but steady, real. A few days later, I visited my parents' house to drop something off. My mother was in the kitchen, humming softly as she chopped vegetables. She glanced up when I entered, her expression unreadable. "Emily," she said simply, like my name was both an acknowledgement and a test. I met her gaze, my shoulders squared. "Mom." For a moment, it felt like another battle was about to begin. But then she looked down at the cutting board, her knife moving slowly. "Dinner will be ready in an hour," she said. "You're welcome to stay." It wasn't an apology. It wasn't the flood of love I'd always longed for. But it was something. A sliver of peace. And for the first time, I realized I didn't need more than that. Not anymore. As the weeks passed, I carried myself differently. I no longer shrank at work when someone criticized my designs. I no longer bit my tongue in conversations when I had something to say. And when I looked in the mirror, I no longer saw my mother's disappointment. I saw myself. Strong. Resilient. Enough. The trip to Hawaii hadn't given me the paradise I expected. It had given me something harder, sharper, and ultimately more valuable. The freedom to stop waiting for love that might never come, and the strength to love myself anyway. And in that freedom, I found peace. On nights when I lay awake, the memory of the Hawaiian waves crashing against black volcanic rock filled my mind. Their sound was endless, relentless, but steady. A reminder that even against the sharpest cliffs, life could endure, could reshape, could keep moving forward. And so could I. I wasn't Claire. I wasn't the favorite. I wasn't the burden or the extra. I was Emily. And finally, that was enough.